Hello ladies and gentlemen, Nick here, and welcome to my review of Doctor Who The Green Death, the fifth and final story of Doctor Who Season 10, and the final story to feature Jo Grant, and at least until 2010 when she returned for the Death of the Doctor, a Sarah Jane Adventures story from that show's fourth series. So The Green Death, first of all, this is a very politically heavy story. So there you go, people who don't like the politics in Series 11 and saying, oh, Doctor Who's getting so political nowadays. It's always been political ever since the start. Remember the Daleks? So yeah, this is possibly the most political story of the Jon Pertwee era, and also the most environmental warning story, which is why we compared Arachnids in the UK to it, because it was that story was also a environmental warning story with, in this case, giant maggots, so insects, or in Arachnids' case, arachnids being brought to life because of toxic waste. And I have to say, it's done really well, the story of how that is doing well. I mean, you can see both sides of the argument of, yes, we need more resources because the other options are limited or in development stages, but it will cause more problems. So to satisfy one side, you're going to cause more problems for the other. And if you leave things out as they are, nothing's going to change and it's all going to stay pretty sucky. So you can get one side. You can see from the chemical, Global Chemicals, is it? Yeah, Global Chemicals. You can see their point of view, but you can also see Whole Wheel's point of view as well. However, soon Global Chemicals starts being taken over by their computer boss, and it becomes a bit of an evil company. I have to say, Boss is a fantastic villain. He is so fun to watch. He's a computer, but he's got these kind of human emotions and thoughts and stuff, and the voice actor does an amazing job at performing the role. I can't remember who the voice actor is. I was supposed to look it up, but I didn't. Link below. Sorry, not link. Name below. But he does an amazing job, and it just works so well. And Boss is actually a really great villain in himself. Stevens is also a pretty good villain, and towards the end he realises his mistakes and tries to destroy the Boss. I love how Boss is calling Stevens his friend when he's trying to do this. The Boss still has some of this human emotion. And he can feel some of this, so that's really great. And we've got some other great supporting cast, some more electrical Global Chemicals company guys. There's this guy who doesn't know what's going on and he tries to help the Doctor at some points, and there's this other guy who's henchman, but he eventually commits suicide after being self-destructed by the mind processing group. And there's this cleaner. The Doctor disguises himself as with the clothes of that cleaner. There's also the Whole Wheel community. There's Professor Cliff Jones, and there's Nancy, who's the only other one who actually gets stuff to say or do besides just standing there. But they're great characters. Professor Jones is a great supporting cast and helps out, and it almost is like another companion or another main character in a way. And Nancy's also a really good character to have around in the last couple of episodes. The rest of the group just don't really do that much to contribute to the episode, besides the fact that there is a group of them there. But there is a nice scene in one of the episodes where they do discuss about a little bit about what they do, so that's not too bad. And you can tell with Cliff, you can tell why Jo has an affection for him. And also, he does act a little bit harsh on her to start with, although, to be honest, so did the Doctor in Terror of the Autons. And I have to say, by this point in the show, the Doctor and Jo have had such a really great friendship. We've gone from what we had in Terror of the Autons, Mind of Evil, to what we've had throughout this season, and it's been great. I think the development has worked really well across the 3 seasons between the two main characters. So it's actually a bit of a shame that Jo's going after such great development, especially this season, and great partnership and chemistry with Pertwee. So yeah, but it also has a pretty hard-hitting and sad ending. People watching it for the first time are probably going to, especially if they've seen the other stories beforehand, are probably going to feel quite emotional about it. And speak of the Doctor, Jon Pertwee continues to be amazing, and the Doctor continues to have some great moments, great scenes, and has some great stuff. And he also has some great action scenes where he beats up a couple of guards. One of them was asking for it, and also dresses up in disguises to get into Global Chemicals at another point. He dresses up as a milkman, and then later on as the window cleaner, or just the cleaner. Mike Yates is also back in the story after a season-long break. He's back as a representative from the Ministry for Global Chemicals, but he's actually an inside man. And he goes underneath some mind-altering process, but the Doctor's able to snap him out of it, and then they almost try to do it to him again, but they fail, and he escapes. I think his mind's a bit twisted. I say twisted. It's been a bit messed up after the events of this story. He's a bit had a bit of a shock, a bit messed up over this, and it probably after the events of this story, that's why he turns on his unit friends in the Invasion of the Dinosaurs. But spoiler alert, more on that story. That's 2 stories time. See how that goes. Jack McCulloch thinks he's been brainwashed, so we'll see how it actually turns out. I'll inform you on the Invasion of the Dinosaurs review. The Brigadier also has some great moments in Benton. I like how he gets a couple of moments where he's in charge for a bit, and he has some great stuff, and he has some great stuff with the Doctor as well. But it's also around here that I have to talk about a fault with the story, and that's the visual effects. Now, throughout the Pertwee stories, there's been some dodgy visual effects with the blue screen or green screen, but for the most part it's been decent, mostly. I mean, some notable not so good stuff. I think the worst case before now was that bit of the spaceship wall blowing off in The Mutants, where Vorg, or whatever his name was, got sucked out. Varrock or whatever. But in this story's case, we got some very dodgy blue screen effects that started. We've got the lift going up, and it looks a bit dodgy. I think if it wouldn't be so bad if the guys the characters weren't wobbling around on the lift, especially the first person we see. Second, we have visuals of some blue screen stuff of the maggots on the floor. I'm not sure why, but they do some blue screen stuff with them when the Doctor and Jo are around them, especially when they're trying to go through a lake of them. Maybe it was because to make the impression that they were rowing through them in the mine truck, but it still looks a bit dodgy. They're okay going up the pipe. That's not too bad a bit. Neither is the boss computer thing. Those are really good. But the other 2 points, they're a bit dodgy. And then the worst case scenario. The worst case is when the Doctor is just driving Bessie through the fields with the maggots up, and he's got Benton with him, and then later on they're spreading the fungus cure, and then the Doctor has to throw his coat up to catch the big giant fly, which actually looks pretty decent for the time, to be honest. Although how just having a coat, getting caught in a coat eventually kills it. Maybe it's covered in fungus. But the bits where the Doctor's driving through the fields of maggots with Benton, they put it in front of a bloody blue screen. Why couldn't you have filmed that on location? You could have had the maggots there. I mean, maybe it was to save cost, but, it would have worked better. I mean, you didn't even have to show the maggots. You could have just had the black-brown fields, or what was left of them, anyway, around the mine area. It just looks bad. This won't be the last one, but it's certainly the most notable in the story. This story is probably one of the most notable ones for having very dodgy blue screen effects, and that example is the worst case of this story. There is worse to come. There's some pretty dodgy ones at the end of the next season's last story in Planet of Spiders, and there's some dodgy ones in Planet of Evil in season 13. But this is a very notable dodgy one, and it was mainly this one I was referring to when I said the effects are going to get dodgier later on when talking about Spearhead from Space. I mean, this one's not the worst case, but it's the point. It's in terms of execution, but it's the worst case in terms of context. It's the worst one in terms of context. Just driving through a field, you need a blue screen for it. So I'm going to wrap this up quickly. Overall, The Green Death is a really fun, really enjoyable story with a great environmentalist message. I think maybe, is it a little bit too long? Maybe an episode too long. I think maybe it could have worked at 5 parts. Yeah, I mean, maybe just sometimes the stories have to be shorter or longer for their own good, and you might just need another 1 or 2 parts thrown into it, BBC guys. But it's still a really good story, has some great emotional stuff towards the end, some great character stuff, some prominent messages for environmentalists, some great action at one point, and there's some decent visual effects in there. You just got quite a few not so good stuff in there as well, and some really great practical effects. The maggots actually look really convincing. Well, more or less, pretty much convincing as does that fly, to be honest. I mean, they're not terribly convincing. Well, yes, they're, for what they had at the time, they're pretty convincing. I mean, if they were CG'd, like nowadays, then maybe they would probably look more convincing. But for what they had at the time, for the practicals they had, it was pretty interesting and pretty decent. And how that they're killed by the fungi is really good, really interesting, and it ties in with Whole Wheels' side of the story, how they come into play with it. And I do like the Sergeant Benson calling them up like cats, coming to get their nice dindins, and the Doctor snapping at him for it. That was actually quite funny. It's better than Baby Benton. Better than the Baby Benton joke from Time Monster. And this is written by the same guy as Time Monster, so yeah, he's stepping his game up by this point. I mean, he co-wrote The Daemons with Barry Letts under the pseudonym Guy Leopold, but then he dipped a bit for Time Monster, and now he's come back for Green Death. He's going to dip again for Plants for Spiders, but you know, what can you do? He's the go-to guy for season finales since season 8, isn't he? Robert Solomon. Solomon. Yeah, then again, like I said, Malcolm Hulke's writing a story every season, so... Anyway, so, The Green Death. I thought this was a great story. Not perfect, but pretty great. So I'm going to give it an 8 out of 10. So I think I enjoyed this more on the rewatch, otherwise it was lower. But I still think it's a really great story and has some great stuff and really good entertaining stuff. I mean, there might be some slower stuff around at some points, but it's got some good stuff. And even the stuff with the miners at the start, it's alright. I mean, it's not amazing, but it's still okay. So, that's The Green Death. I think that was a good story. So that's it from me. Thank you for watching. Next time we'll be starting Season 11 with Sarah Jane Smith's first story, The Time Warrior, which also introduces the Sontarans. So and the first mention of Gallifrey. So it's a triple first. Quadruple if you count the fact that it's the first of the final of Season 11 and Jon Pertwee's final season. Lots of firsts. Even if it's the first of one of the lasts, in the case of the third Doctor. But yeah, and it's available complete and uncut for the very first time on DVD. And it's only 12 years old, this release. Yay. So yeah, next time, The Time Warrior. And I'll see you guys then. Goodbye. Oh, but first, the Season 10 ranking. That's next, then The Time Warrior. Okay, now we're done. Bye. Don't forget to click below to subscribe to the official Nicholas Payne Retro YouTube channel. Did I say the score? I'm not sure. So I'm going to give The Green Death an 8 out of 10. Right. So if I didn't say the score, that's where we then re-include it. So, there you go.